On Tuesday, I was disappointed to see Joy Reid of MSNBC. She had a guest on her show, a reporter for the Financial Times who's not Canadian and who spouted right-wing nonsense about Trudeau and trashing him while Joy cheerfully swallowed every drop of bullshit.
We get to see the maple trees, maple sugar and the maple leaves. We get the biggest wheat fields growing tall. In Canada, where we see the reversing falls. In Canada, we get to see them all.
Well, it seems that the felon-elect continues to obsess over Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He's been taunting and tweeting after midnight on Tuesday morning after Justin Trudeau's remarks at an event hosted in Halifax on Monday at the Chamber of Commerce.
Now, for years, Americans have been paying more for their homes than they should because of unjust tariffs on softwood lumber. Maybe this level of tariffs will actually have them realize that this is something they are doing to themselves. But our responses to the unfair steel and aluminum tariffs were what ended up lifting those tariffs last time.
I can tell the president, I'm sure not thinking of Justin Trudeau at midnight. So if he's thinking of Justin at midnight, it's probably a good relationship. But I'm focused on making sure we get this trade deal done.
But he's taking Trump's threat of 25% tariffs seriously, saying the Americans are jealous.
They see the growth here, Mr. Speaker, and we're their number one competition. You wonder why, the President-elect Trump wants to put tariffs? Because we're a threat to the U.S., because we're a manufacturing powerhouse.
And U.S. mainstream media continues to push the narrative that Trudeau is somehow kissing the ring or bending the knee. Last week I was disappointed by Meidas Touch Popak for getting it wrong, but on Tuesday I was disappointed to see Joy Reid of MSNBC follow suit. Even worse, she had a guest on her show, a reporter for the Financial Times who's not Canadian and who spouted right-wing nonsense about Trudeau and trashing him while Joy cheerfully swallowed every drop of bullshit.
Canada and France are taking a different approach and attempting to befriend Trump by visiting or offering visits to the next president. It's two competing approaches, but you only get to keep your dignity with one of them.
Of two different leaders. I mean, you have Trudeau going to Mar-a-Lago straight away after this 25% tariff threat was issued by Trump, cap in hand, as it were, in a kind of posture of submission, although, of course, the Canadians would push back on that. And Claudia Sheinbaum from Mexico issuing a very correct but icily sort of phrased rebuttal of some of Trump's points, and essentially doing the opposite of what Trudeau did, not bending the knee.
Well, apparently Ronald Dump never got over the slate after the last G7 meeting, when he left early and Trudeau told the press that Canada would not relish imposing its own tariffs, but would not be pushed around either. Maybe it was the relish part he didn't like. We all know he loves his ketchup. Speaking of which, that's one of the products on a list of possible strategic items to tariff in response. Ketchup exports are worth nearly $3 billion across 36 states. Well, while Meidas Touch might have felt some of the backlash over Popak's comments from the comments underneath it, because this week Ben Meiselas has been doing some great coverage as the tariff and border concerns continue to attract headlines both in the US and Canada alike. On Wednesday, Canadian provincial premiers held a second closed-door meeting with the Prime Minister to discuss what plans are on the table in response to the continued threats of a 25% blanket tariff, as well as how to respond to the border concerns. While most of the premiers agreed that it was a productive meeting that took into consideration suggestions from all, presenting a Team Canada approach and not freaking out, the leader of the PCP and official opposition, Pierre Poilievre, didn't get the memo and continues to attack what he calls Trudeau's weak approach.
But of course, coming out of that meeting, the suggestion from Blanchet, from Jagmeet Singh and others was that there was one person in that room that perhaps wasn't getting the memo about toning it down. Conservative supporters insist that Pierre Poilievre isn't out to be running down Canada, really, as he attacks the Trudeau government for its handling of this file. His supporters insist that his criticisms have been very measured. But I have to say, watching the House yesterday, it did not seem, again, like he was really restraining himself at all.
Some of the other big products and services being considered for strategic targeting include energy, electricity, and minerals.
Yeah, so I want to get started right on Doug Ford's comments there that Ontario might cut off energy from the U.S. in relation to these threatened tariffs from Donald Trump. That's a pretty dramatic threat, as Catherine was just laying out. What do you think of it?
Yeah, it certainly is, and it just is a real indicator of how problematic this tariff threat is, that we are now in the position of considering some of these very dramatic matters.
Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, given their version and interpretation of what happened in the meeting between the Prime Minister, the Premiers, and them as senior cabinet ministers, essentially saying that they were encouraged by the response from the Premiers to work together in a strong Team Canada response to the threats of tariffs from Donald Trump, including some Premiers proactively raising the idea of withholding things such as critical minerals and metals from the United States. Many questions about withholding energy based on what Ontario Premier Doug Ford said earlier. Is he talking about Ontario electricity there, which seems to be maybe what he's talking about? Or is he implying a broader energy boycott of some sort from Canada across the country?
NDP Treasurer Charlie Angus was on the House floor today and gave a fantastic speech ripping apart Poilievre and the record of the Conservative Party.
But they decided to upend their own opportunity to speak on something that they'd previously committed to in order to use the House of Commons to amplify the distortions that are coming out of Mar-a-Lago and Donald Trump. Primarily his falsehood that Canada is this fentanyl trafficking system causing deaths in the United States. We have the world's longest undefended border. And other than 1812, when they attacked us and tried to take us over, we've maintained that border, and we've maintained good-natured relations. But we haven't gone along with the Americans when they've tried to bully us. We haven't embraced their wide-open and dangerous death cult gun culture. Even though many, many, many Canadians are registered gun owners, we accept the principle of having responsible gun ownership as opposed to the reckless guns that are killing people across the United States. We have not supported their belief that health care should belong to those who have money. Exactly. We took a different tact, even when we were being undermined as being communists and socialists at the time. When the United States insisted that Canadians, young men, go and die in the rice paddies of Vietnam, we said, no, we're not going to send our young men to die in Vietnam. It's a wrong war, and it was a wrong war. And we opened our borders to many great young Americans who were not going to go die needlessly in Vietnam.
That's right.
We're in a different situation with Donald Trump, a convicted predator who's seriously undermining the democratic process in the United States, and he thinks he can just push us around.
Exactly.
He insults us.
Yep.
The Conservatives seem to like it because he's insulting our Prime Minister, but he's not really insulting the Prime Minister. He's insulting Canadians, calling us the 51st state.
That's right, exactly.
Once there was a Canada that had a flag that didn't need to be waved. A flag that represented who we are. We didn't boast about it. It wasn't until our flag was appropriated by conspiracy haters and stuck on pickup trucks, promoting all kinds of disinformation. Our flag was something that just said, it's about values. And it's something that we all understood. We didn't have to brag about. We didn't have to brag about that when we were a country of 11 million people and the Americans were saying, oh, we don't want to go to war. On the very first day Hitler invaded Poland, 11 million Canadians stood up and created the 4th largest air force in the world, the 4th largest navy in the world. We sent our young people all across the world to defend the notion of freedom and parliamentary democracy. And we paid an enormous price. And we came back and we didn't wave the flag then. We just came back and did what we did because we were Canadians. But here we are with this falsehood being perpetrated by the member who lives in Stornoway, that whatever Donald Trump says, he will use to burn the house down to the Prime Minister. So he's using this falsehood on fentanyl.
And while condemning Trudeau for being weak or giving in to the shitgibbons' demands, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith went to Vegas to meet with governors and thinks Dear Farter is hilarious.
I think President Trump is hilarious and was making a joke.
Alberta's premier amused by Donald Trump's suggestion that Canada become the 51st U.S. state to avoid 25% trade tariffs. Canadian officials who were in the room with Trump at the time confirmed the president-elect was only joking. Danielle Smith also sharing some laughs about it with Fox News Wednesday morning.
I think President Trump has a great sense of humor.
But what's not a joke, Smith says, is Trump's concerns about border security and his demand Canada meet its NATO commitment for military spending of 2% GDP. Also very serious to the Premier that Alberta avoid any tariffs on any products sold to our southern neighbours.
And MAGA Light Ontario Premier Doug Ford is paying for advertisements across the border and dropping hints that maybe he'd like to go down to Mar-a-Lago too, to get tough.
We also know that as chair of the group of premiers, Ontario's Doug Ford has been doing a lot of U.S. media, not just the paid advertising campaign that they have organized to make Ontario's case directly to Americans, but also he popped up again on Fox News late yesterday, part of a series of U.S. interviews he appears to be doing with American outlets. He told that Fox News audience that it is the premiers who are going to hold Justin Trudeau accountable for the action that's required on the border. Doug Ford also said that he'd be more than willing to help lobby Donald Trump in person, seemed to be sort of asking for an invitation to go to Mar-a-Lago. He said he'd hop on a plane down to Florida tomorrow if the president had a few minutes. So,
and to add further insult to injury, Elon Musk has now stuck his insufferable comments into the mix about our Prime Minister. He's likely still butthurt that Canada turned down his Starlink in favor of our own Telesat system. And even though he and Dougie Ford made a deal recently to use it to connect remote communities. Yeah, they care about those remote communities. But meanwhile, everyday Canadian consumers have been making their own decisions when it comes to making purchases in light of the threats and insults.
The majority of Canadians say they're much less likely to buy American products as a result of these tariffs, about 51%, and an additional 14 say they're at least somewhat less likely to buy American products.
Canadian consumer confidence is continuing to decline since the U.S. presidential election in early November. That's according to the latest consumer confidence survey from Nanos Research. Apparently, people are almost 4 times more likely to think the economy will get weaker rather than stronger in the next 6 months.
And while it remains to be seen how much is bluster and how much will actually result from these antagonistic stances, it seems that Canadians are ready to hunker down and prepare for the fight, and we sure won't be bullied, bought, or sold by the dumbest man on earth.
Stay tuned for more on Political Drain, Canadian edition.